Awesome. Well, welcome to Marketing to Kingmakers. And so this is actually the second year that I've given this talk, so we're going to go part two. Treat it like a second date. We're getting to know each other a little bit more, maybe getting ready to meet the parents. And so this talk is actually modeled after this book called The New Kingmakers, in which it talks about how there's a shift in power to developers as kind of the centers of power within organizations, not only for purchasing decisions, but also just kind of influencing. So the question that I have is really, what about the queens, right? Because if you're thinking about a chessboard, more often than not, the queens have the most moves. And so they're actually, the full stack developer, the full stack player that you're looking for. And these are the types of developers that you're after in your organization, except they can be hard to find. And even harder, they're harder to market to, right? Especially after looking at purchasing decisions and kind of influencing whether or not they should buy your software or even API tooling. And here's Waldo for those who are trying to point him out. And so we're going to talk about developer marketing. But we're going to talk about developer marketing in the field, so much like the events that you're attending today, because developers like to get together. They like to get together in real life to discuss and talk about the problems and types of situations they're getting involved with. And so here's a snapshot of kind of one of the larger hackathons that we've done. And so I actually used to work at CA Technologies. They're one of the sponsors here today. And in doing their global developer marketing, we did some work with Forrester. And what we found is that developers like to get together 3 times a year, right? So more often than not, they'll average about 3 events in the field with their peers. So I actually have a question for those who are in the room today. So I'm curious, how many developer events you all attend? We'll start with 2 because today counts as 1. So I'm curious, how many people attend at least 2 events a year? Okay. How about 3? All right. 5? 10? Ah, nice. And so this talk is really garnered from lessons learned that I put together about attending and organizing a lot of these different conferences, so that way your marketing teams and your developer evangelists can design the right systems when you're in the field. And so here's a few of the events that I've either sponsored, attended, or spoken at, just to kind of give some frame of reference. And they're broken down between the larger language and platform type conferences. So these are your DockerCons, the GitHub Universes of the world. Also the regional conferences, so the Nordic APIs would kind of fall within this category. Hackathons, we're going to talk about internal and external hackathons here, but then also local conferences and meetups, and how to attend those is really bringing out the grassroots for your people in the field. And how you do your mix obviously depends on the marketing budget, right? So this is where the marketing comes back into this talk. But more importantly, it's who is your user. Even more importantly than that, it's who your buyer is. Because if you're thinking about all the different people within the organization and those that you're trying to influence, there's usually a lot of different players. So the buyer could be up here, very strategic. You might have IT coming in and running interference across the board, and then your user might actually be down here. Still very important, but they need to work in concert with each other to make things happen. Sometimes the buyer is a user. And this is very fortunate, right? Because especially with your marketing and product development, product management efforts, everything's aligned to kind of one single user persona. Sometimes they may or may not be the buyer. Sometimes you have no idea. Especially as you go into larger organizations, there's a lot of different players. And so we're going to start with the language and platform conferences and some of the lessons learned. So this is a shot from GitHub Universe. One of the tacks that we decided to do and we continue to do is, so we actually didn't sponsor GitHub Universe, nothing against GitHub, but we really didn't have an opportunity to control the messaging that we would have liked. And so one of the tacks that we'll often employ is we will set up our own series or own side event and then actually speak at that, right? So that allows us to get our thought leadership out there. It also helps if you do it at a brewery. But the lesson learned here really is, speak at your own parties if you can't speak at the booths or conferences. We did this again actually this year at Dreamforce, where we held a enterprise integration panel with SAP and Western Union and talked a lot about the struggles that they had, but this was a side event as far as the larger Dreamforce event. We also did it at South by Southwest, just as another example. So moving on into regional events. So here's a shot from Web Expo that's held in Prague each year. One of the tacks that I use to employ at CA, because so if you're not from OCA, they have like 200 different products. And it's really hard to like, hey, would you like anywhere from a mainframe to API management? There's quite the range of products that you can lead with. So one of the tacks that we opted to, if you're not in a technology-specific conference like this one, is really to lead with an experience in S.W.A.G. And then that way it gave us a way to engage developers, first kind of understand where they are, what stack they're playing with, and then we can align the technology with that. And so that's kind of lessons learned from there. And here's kind of one of the developers who really just opted to play Pac-Man with us instead of talk about products. A quick note on S.W.A.G. So the marketing definition of S.W.A.G is stuff that we all get. However, some fun fact is that the term S.W.A.G actually came from the 1700s as far as ill-gotten swag or booty from pirates. So next time you're out at the booths, just bring out your inner pirate and grab some of those things and bring them home for you. There is a spectrum of S.W.A.G, so this is just not inclusive by any means. But people really get a sense of how much effort you put into the brand and your marketing strategy as far as how far along the spectrum you're going to go, right? Because everyone knows the internal value of this. A lot of larger conferences will go towards backpacks, hoodies, those types of things. Quick side note, socks are amazing, especially from the operations, because you don't have to worry about size and they're easy to pack. And then if you really want to win, have an open bar. So I'm going to move on and talk about hackathons. And so there's kind of two different hackathons. One is internal and external. So internal, I'll talk about, it's with your team and then also your customers. So here's a hackathon that I ran at American Express in the States. And here's a few other organizations that I've done internal hackathons for. And so these are hackathons that we'd organize with our customers to really bring out their internal innovation. If they used our product, that was always a bonus, but really it was to enable thought leadership within our most strategic accounts. In doing a lot of those, you see really what works and what doesn't. So we came up with a set of rules as far as internal hackathon rules that you can run by. The first is safe pitches. The worst thing that can happen in an internal hackathon is everyone feels like they're working for an additional 48 hours. And there's not a lot of love from upper management. And so really you want to encourage safe pitches, which are open ideas, and they don't have to be tied to existing user stories or something else that wants to be worked on. The corollary of that, though, is that everyone demos. Right? You can work on anything that you want, but you also have to show up and show the organization that you're working on something that truly matters. Stack the judges. And so what I mean by this is bring in the most executive people that you can as far as judging the hackathon rules. This does two things. One, it allows people in the organization visibility into higher management that they might not otherwise have. This is especially important in larger organizations. But it also does the corollary of it allows the executives to see who's kind of young and hungry and that is more innovative within the organization, kind of bringing those ideas. It's not just for engineers. So we often invited product managers and UI, UX people, even some graphic design, because in order to make a unique product, you have to have all of those components, not just code. And for healthy code, you should have a healthy snacks. This is just a quick note. I think we've moved beyond kind of Red Bulls and pizzas, even though they're still nice. And the expensive part is over. It's really expensive for organizations to take engineers out of a sprint for even a couple days as far as features and, I'd say potential revenue that's on the line. And so with that, don't skimp on the small things, right? No one likes to show up into an empty conference room and just kind of eat out of cardboard pizzas and kind of work away for 2 days. Really, put the effort in and make it a good event. And the last piece, is facilitate like a boss. So this can make or break a lot of internal hackathons is how you run the timing of it. It's really what attendees remember the most outside of the prizes. So moving out towards external hackathons. So these are hackathons that you either see in the field, sponsor yourselves. Here's one of the larger hackathons that we participated in, and it's Developer Week out in San Francisco. I think it attracts about a few thousand different attendees. And so there's a lot of different things that you can see. So you can see like right in here, like win $5,000. If you are sponsoring an external hackathon and you're using cash, that's when you'll attract solutions. So if you're using cash to solutions, you're really looking to solve business problems. Especially in the public space, this attracts a special type of team, the professional hackathoners. And they usually consist of a front-end person, a back-end person, a UI UX, and a pitchman. There's usually those kind of 4 groups, and then they'll expand from there. And these are people who attend public hackathons for prize money, and they'll do it in a way that they use libraries they know, right? So they'll do like Node on the back end, maybe React on the front, so, but everything is ready and set to go, right? As far as how they're going to be approaching the problem. They have their salesperson kind of giving that pitch, lining up the slides. There's been so many hackathons that have been won on great slideware instead of great products, so that's why they bring in the pitchmen and kind of graphic design to have those. But if you're using prizes, those are, you will attack the passion teams, right? And so this is really the side effect of good learning. These are the people who just want to go out there on the weekend and say, oh, I learned React Native, that was so much better. But you're really attracting a different type of crew as far as working on those types of problems. So now we're going to move into local and meetups. And there's actually an etiquette to meetups. There's a lot of unwritten rules as far as how to attend and kind of really nurture those that attend locally. So the first is be yourself, right? So don't be the brand, don't be the organization, really show up as an individual. When I was coaching a lot of developer evangelists and even sometimes the sales people that will attend local meetups, right, as far as like getting the word out, you really have to attend events that you care about, because if you attend an event you don't care about, it really shows to the rest of the group. But more importantly, be that enabler. So be the person that will bring the food, be the person that will be access to new speakers, be the person that can show up with AWS credits, those types of things that really allow for those grassroots types of organizations to thrive. And bringing some swag always helps. So, and last piece, I really want to come back to digital. So we've been talking a lot about the marketing and how to approach developers within the field, but they're only as helpful if they really amplify each other. So they really should be seen in concert together, so that anything that you do in the field should be amplified by your larger digital efforts, right? It's not an excuse for developer evangelists to go out in the field because you have bad documentation, or your features don't work, or those types of things where you can't have it. There's this ongoing saying that documentation is like sex. So when it's good, it's really good. And when it's bad, it's still better than nothing, because you still need those endpoint resources, right? So just kind of a lesson that if you're building your own APIs, please document them. So thank you for your time. That's me. Appreciate it.